Yeah.
My name's Rabia Haddon, I'm the Governance Service Officer. Welcome to Corporate Committee. Can I just go through a few things? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first physical Corporate Committee meeting taking place at the Town Hall following the end of the emergency arrangements and virtual setup. All committee members are requested to attend in person. Members who wish to participate in a non-decision-making capacity are able to do so remotely. All committee meetings are scheduled to be convened at the Town Hall, so at present time, only members of the committee are physically attending. The meeting will be live streamed for public viewing and a record of the decisions will be published after the meeting. I would just like to remind members of the following protocols. Only speak when invited by the chair. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and direct all communication via the chair. For those joining remotely, please ensure that your mics are muted when you are not speaking. If you're having any technical difficulties, please use the chat function in the Google Meet to alert the meeting. Please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the committee or to make any other comments. I would now like to hand over to the chair.
Thank you, Rabia. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor Rathbone, Councillor Pluvier and Councillor Race. Any other apologies? I'd also like to welcome online, we've got Councillor Spence, Councillor Root, and I believe Councillor Joseph too. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any interests they wish to declare? No. Okay. Agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree the minutes held on the 19th of March 2021, subject to the inclusion of Councillor Race in the list of apologies?
9th of March.
Sorry, the 19th of March.
It says the 9th of March in the minutes.
Sorry, no.
Okay. The 9th of March. Can we also agree the minutes from the extraordinary meeting held on the 27th of April 2021 as contained within the agenda pack?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, business regulation service delivery plans 2021 to 2022. Can I invite Jerry McCarthy to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
I'll be brief with these as I can be, so bear with me, please. And if I go through all of this, then I'll take questions at the end, if that's okay for everyone.
Yep, that's fine, Jerry.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair has indicated, this report relates to service delivery plans for business regulation for 2021-22 and covers the following areas: environmental health, food safety, environmental health, occupational health and safety, environmental protection, which covers noise and other nuisance and trading standards. I should have said to begin, has everyone got a physical agenda, and then you'll be able to follow what I'm saying better?
Yes, we
Yes, we have, Jerry.
So if I take you to paragraph 1.5.1 on page 20, and I just want to remind members that the Food Law Enforcement Plan is actually a statutory plan which sets out how the Council will undertake enforcement food safety legislation, and the plan is agreed in accordance with the Food Standards Agency's framework agreement as an important process to ensure that national food safety priorities and standards are addressed and delivered locally. Paragraph 1.5.3 on the same page states that the plan sets out the objectives of the service and demonstrates how they're linked to the Mayor's priorities and Hackney's sustainability community strategy, and also sets out areas of food law enforcement, management arrangements, resources, and work allocated to achieve key targets. Over the page on page 21, paragraph 1.6.1, occupational health and safety. With regard to this, health and safety responsibility is split between the health and safety executive and the Borough of Hackney. And that depends on the activity being undertaken by the business. And obviously Hackney itself is an enforcing authority within its own right and has to make adequate provision for enforcement. And the government introduced the Local Authority National Enforcement Code in May 2013, and that sets out the principles the council needs to follow. Under paragraph 1.6.3, the plan fulfills the obligation of the Section 18 of the Health and Safety of Work, etc. Act 1974, and the Enforcement Code. And also the HSE publishes data annually on enforcement activities of authorities. Paragraph 1.7, page 21 again relates to trading standards. And obviously, trading standards are incredibly needy service in Hackney, provides services to individuals, communities and businesses to enable people to buy goods and services with confidence and security, and also offer advice to businesses. And obviously it deals with public safety, health, through ensuring safe storage of dangerous items and preventing the sale of dangerous products, such as age-restricted products to minors, i.e. knives, alcohol and tobacco. And obviously, service also deals with fair trading to protect consumers from the impacts of unfair trading. If I go over the page onto page 22 and move down to the bottom of the page on paragraph 4.04, and I'm back now at the Food Law Enforcement Service Plan. And as of the 1st of April, there are 1,237 food hygiene and 825 food standard interventions due, and that's based on premises risk rating and the risks which are determined at a primary inspection. And over the page in paragraph 4.06, I just wanted to draw your attention to the cyber attack, which meant that we had a backlog. So as of the 1st of April this year, there is a backlog of 879 food hygiene inspections and 461 food standards overdue. This is in addition to what's due this year. And obviously, because of COVID last year, the Food Standards Agency instructed us to suspend inspections until July. And obviously, that resulted in an extra 194 programmed inspections. You'll see in paragraph 4.08, we have a strategy in place for the current year to retain additional member staff to concentrate on overdue category C's and D's until the end of September. And we've also taken on an additional 2 members of staff to deal with this, because some of our permanent members of staff were actually seconded to the COVID response team, which we set up as a result of the COVID pandemic back in July 2020. And I'll come back to that in a bit. Paragraph 4.10, you'll see the fire service faced a number of challenges in 2021, which were 2 major ones were the impact of coronavirus and the cyber attack, which says cyber track, apologies. And obviously, officers have to deal with that as well. Under paragraph 4.11, you will see that the Food Standards Agency obtained government's permission to deviate from the inspection programme, suspend all routine inspections, which did happen as a result. And I'll refer you here to page 55 of your pack, which shows the key areas for improvement we have in place for this year, next year and beyond, to get back on track with inspections and visits. And I will refer to that in a bit. But the Food Standards Agency have recently issued guidance which shows how we can deviate from the current premises inspection and concentrate on rated premises and overdue category A's and B's. And as of this week, they've also announced funding will be available to deal with unrated premises for the backlog. And obviously we will apply for funding. There's no guarantee we'll be successful because every local authority will be applying for funding. There's only a certain pot of money to go around. How they split that, I don't know. So if I go over the page to page 24, paragraph 4.14, and this shows what the Food Standards Agency placed emphasis on 3 priority areas, which you will see are identify businesses training, change of ownership, premises are non-history, non-compliance, and obviously urgent reactive work and overdue visits, and they've put them into high, medium, and low priority, low risk. And paragraph 4.17, again, we have a backlog of inspections, and as I said, due to the cyber attack, we've lost all our historical data. So I can't, while we've given you figures, they're not exactly precise. So I just want to make that quite clear. The other thing I want to draw to your attention on page 25, paragraph 4.19, is that in 2021, we estimated we would receive 600 new registrations for business. We normally sort of receive 600 new ones and another, say, 400 or 500 close. So it's normally a steady picture, but actually in the period November to March, we actually received 500 new food business registrations, which we would not have expected. So we're getting an average of 100 a month. And the main reason for that would be because of conflicting advice issued by the government regarding definition of essential and non-essential businesses. A lot of non-essential businesses changed their business model to enable them open. So they were selling their registered food business, which allowed them, say, to sell bread, milk, etc., and the rest of their business could then open and stay open as a result, even though it was a non-essential business. So I just want to make that clear. And obviously the other important bit is on paragraph 4.21 on page 25 again, is that the Food Standards Agency is planning a fundamental review of how food safety is delivered in the UK, which will have a significant effect on all local authorities through the Regulating Our Future programme. And that will go on for years to come. Under health and safety, paragraph 4.22, again, page 25, this officers use a number of interventions to deal with businesses. So a lot of them, we have a programme of inspections which is dictated to us by the Health and Safety Executive, and that's on paragraph 4.25, page 25. And as of this week, we still hadn't got a risk rate. We hadn't got a risk rating for the current year from the Health and Safety Executive, but presumably the Health and Safety Executive is busy with COVID and all sorts of other things as well. So that has been held up. And obviously, again, paragraph 4.26 over the page 26. Again, the work of the team has been disrupted due to COVID and obviously the cyber attack as well. And paragraph 4.27, and this refers to the setting up of the COVID response team, which we set up in July last year to deal with when businesses reopened after the initial lockdown. And obviously, a lot of work had to be done on providing guidance and assistance to businesses to ensure they reopened safely and remained open. And obviously, there is a indication of COVID responsibility, what the team activity which you've done, and up to the end of April, it actually the team has undertaken over 2,700 visits to premises in Hackney, which is considerable considering we seconded people from within the service to that team on its own. And paragraph 4.28, I have mentioned the cyber attack already, but we are in the process of setting up a contract for a new database with a database provider. And also, once the cyber attack happened, we were able to have workarounds in place from cyber attack happened on a Sunday, and we had workarounds in place to deal with that from the Monday after the cyber attack. So we did not lose that much data, but as I say, we've lost our historical data, but we have adequate records to be able to keep everything. And briefly mention trading standards, which again deals with a wide range of issues, supply of age-restricted products, which I've mentioned. And the other thing I did want to mention, there's an error in paragraph 4.33 in relation to the numbers of inspections which are due this year. And it should be actually 135 high-risk premises, 172 upper medium, and 369 low medium. And there is an explanation of what each of those premises is on page 108 in your report, in your agenda, in your pack of information on the agenda. And only other thing I did want to bring to your attention, which I referred to earlier on, was page 55 of the agenda, which are the key areas for improvement, development for the next 2 years in terms of food safety. And there's a list of issues which the service needs to put in place to make sure we're fully back on track. And I think that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jerry, and I appreciate, both with COVID and us and the cyber attack, the work that your team have done this year under very difficult circumstances. Just before I put out for members' questions, I realise that I haven't introduced the members in the chamber. So if I could start off with myself, Councillor Claire Potter, Chair of the Corporate Committee. If I could go over to my left.
Councillor Katie Hanson, Vice Chair of the Corporate Committee.
Councillor Stopps.
Councillor Vincent Stopps, Hackney Central Ward.
Councillor Gracia. Councillor Ozen.
Councillor Janus Sam from London Fields.
Councillor Chauhan.
Councillor AJ Chauhan, Haggiston Ward.
And Councillor Bell.
Councillor Brian Bell.
Thank you, members. And I'll just acknowledge again, we have Councillor Spence and Councillor Root on the call too. Okay, if I could invite questions from members. Anybody got any questions at all for Jerry?
I have a question.
Councillor Ozen.
Related to this. I guess so.
Can you
Can't
speak
hear you.
up, Councillor Ozen?
I get some issues from different residents in different area in the borough about the food. They are raising to me about the expired food on the shelf.
Okay.
Many shops. So what are councillor doing about it?
Okay, so Councillor Ozen has just raised the question about expired food on the shelves that residents have alerted him to. Could you describe the process, Jerry, that officers are going through to deal with this issue?
Obviously, what I would say is if residents have any concerns about that they contact our environmental health team directly, and then visits will be made to any premises where they are. It is a strict offence to sell food past its sell-by date. That is an offence under food safety legislation. And obviously, what I will say is, I don't know what type of retail premises you're referring to, Council, but obviously a small retail shop would be a category E premises for inspection. It wouldn't be a high risk premises for us, unlike, for example, a pizza restaurant or any other cafe that's making and preparing and selling hot food for consumption on or off the premises. They would be much higher risk than a retail shop selling food. But obviously, and as I say, normally we would deal with those through the alternative enforcement strategy, and they're unlikely to get a visit every year, a low category premises, whereas the high risk ones would be inspected. But I'm quite happy to take any details of any premises and dates of when this has happened, and then pass it on to the officers, and they will investigate and undertake an inspection. One of our priorities is actually to deal with any food safety complaints received, so they will be responded to.
Councillor Ozen, we've got further.
Rather than small retail businesses, shops, I'm talking about bigger markets and also wholesalers. So what do we do about all those?
Okay, Councillor Ozen is actually referring to markets and wholesalers. So I don't know if you've got any further guidance on that.
Not particularly. If we know about individual premises addresses, then we will investigate them. We will undertake inspections of those premises.
Okay, so make sure you raise those queries, Councillor Ozen, if any residents raise it with you.
Most of our local shops are getting from the wholesalers, which is just very nearby to our.
Can't hear you, sorry.
So do I need to raise the name of the wholesalers, or should I write?
I don't want you to raise the name of a wholesaler here. I mean, I'd rather if you had if the wholesaler is not within Hackney, then we're not able to deal with that. That would be dealt with by the authority where the wholesaler is based.
Okay, but most of our small shops, they are shopping from the wholesalers which are not in our borough anyway. There are not. I don't even know any wholesalers in Hackney. Most of them are in Walthamstow or Tower Hamlets or Anfield, in those areas. So maybe we should get in touch with our colleagues from those councils. So
Yeah, that's a possible avenue. Is that what you would suggest, Jerry?
That's what we would normally
Yeah.
do. We would go back to the authority where the wholesaler is based and ask them to investigate any breaches of food safety legislation, i.e. past dates for sale.
Okay, any further questions? Or Councillor Chohan?
Just a quick question. I don't know if it falls within the remit of change standards, but have they been monitoring the COVID rules that shops follow? Because I've noticed, the COVID rules that shops follow, does that fall under trading standards, health and safety of the public? Because I've noticed disparities, inconsistencies between different shops with the number of people allowed in and not allowed in.
Did you hear that question, Jerry?
Yes, I've heard that, Councillor, yes. Our COVID response team have been dealing with all businesses, whether they're small shops to big restaurants, to ensure they're COVID compliant. And we deal with that. Obviously, if there are under 5, if there's 5 employees or less in a business, they do not really need a specific written risk assessment. But we advise every business have a risk assessment, and that would include the number of people to be allowed in at any one time. I think you will find that most shops have small business, a small retail shop will say maximum of 2 or 3 people in the shop at any one time, which is what I have seen. But obviously, and anything else we will enforce. So there is a specific COVID response email address, which any concerns can be raised through that email address, and it will be investigated by the team. And even to this day, they are still out investigating people not complying with social distancing, seating being too near to each other, a whole variety of COVID issues that they're dealing with on a daily basis.
Thank you, Jerry.
The only thing I would point out to councillors is that the wearing of face coverings is not enforced by the local authority, it's enforced by the police, if that's an issue the councillors are noting.
Thank you, Jerry. Councillor Spence, would you like to raise your query?
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much for the presentation. I did note that it sort of came to a grinding halt at section 4 of your report, and you didn't really touch on section 5, which is about the resources available to the service against the what appears to be the statutory requirements you have to meet in terms of inspections. And in section 5, I note that you, over a series of pages, give a what appears to be a very sort of careful breakdown of the commitments you need to meet to cover the inspection regime. And if I then take you to 5.4 on page 65, at 5.41, you come to the conclusion that the resources required to fulfil the plan for 21-22 is approximately 8.41 full-time equivalent, but the resources available to you at the present time are 4.8. I mean, clearly there's on the face of it, my reading of that is there's a crisis of resources available to the service right now. You've only effectively got something close to half or just over half the people you need to carry out the work that you are obliged to perform. And I'd like you to sort of comment on that in terms of how we pull that back, but also, you know, how did we get into that position where the resources appear to be so out of kilter with the demands on the service? Clearly, that's a question also for, I guess, for the executive to deal with in terms of resourcing. But I'll stop there. But I think we need to have a discussion about what appears to be a crisis of resourcing.
Jerry, could you come back on that?
Yep.
Patrick, were you referring to page 61, did you say?
What I'm referring to is starts, doesn't it? Hang on.
There are two different page numbers, like sort of portrait and landscape. So
Yeah, well, mine's in landscape, and I'm looking at, and mine's a paper one. Section 5, resources.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Spence.
And that's page 57 through to 67.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Jerry.
58 it continues, so that's an appendix. 67.
Jerry, could you comment on the resource issue highlighted
Yep.
in the report?
That is correct, but having said that, we have kept on one additional contractor we had employed in 2021 for 21-22, and we have got an additional 3 members of staff undertaking work to cover for staff seconded to the COVID response team. So we are more or less up to speed with resources at the current time, but we won't be able to keep those resources, so we've only got funding till the end of September. And that is something I will review with the cabinet member in July.
So to summarise, as far as you're concerned, we're okay until the autumn, but then there needs to be some further solutions
Yes.
September onwards. Okay. Does that satisfy you, Councillor Spence, in terms of an answer? Have you got any further queries?
Well, I think that's helpful up to now, but obviously it'd be helpful to get a report later in the autumn. I don't know if that can come back to corporate committee or not, about what the plan is to address that gap, resource gap.
I think we can ask for an update at the next corporate committee meeting, just on that particular item. Yeah? Well, can we make a note of that, Abia? Thank you. Councillor Stops.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and just to say thank you for keeping all of this together as much as you've been able to. I guess my worry is that over this cyber attack, you must have lost a lot of evidence and a lot of case stuff in terms of prosecuting people and progressing cases. They're now sort of back to level 0, I presume. Is that the case? And the other point is throughout this, you've got this policy context and then equality impact assessment not applicable. I just wonder, that's asking for comment about the equality impact assessments. I know one of the reasons is for a later report that I've insisted on us upping our game in terms of highways instruction is precisely because of equality impacts. So I wonder why you've got not applicable associated with this policy work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we have lost any paperwork or records we would have relating to any prosecutions that would have been lost. And secondly, I have to say I've never completed an equality impact assessment for these reports previously, but going forward is something we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Have members got any further questions at all? Okay, Jerry, I'd like to thank you for giving that report, and I'm going to ask the committee, will you approve the food law enforcement service plan for 2021 to 22?
agreed.
Agreed.
Approved.
Will you consider the level and scope of work being carried out to meet the requirements of the plan?
Yes.
And will you note the level and scope of work being carried out to meet the requirements of the Occupational Health and Safety and Trading Standards Service delivery plans?
Noted.
Thank you, members. Moving on to agenda item 5, Enforcement and Environmental Protection Service delivery plans 2021 to 2022. Can I again invite Jerry McCarthy to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. And this report starts on page 114 of your agenda pack.
Thank you.
And again, on paragraph 1.1 on page 114, this plan sets out the objectives of the service and demonstrates how it's linked to the Mayor's priorities and again, Hackney's sustainable community strategy. Paragraph 1.2 sort of sets out the areas relating to environmental enforcement and environmental protection. And obviously, paragraph 1.3, we've seen enforcement covers a wide variety of matters from highway obstructions, littering, fly tipping, to do whatever needs to be taken to resolve issues. And obviously, paragraph 1.5, it just referring to environmental protection, which deals with commercial noise and other nuisances, odours, artificial light nuisance construction sites. So that gives you a flavour of what both teams do within the service. The background on page 115, I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, but both services were created in 2017 when the Community Safety Enforcement Business Regulation Service commenced in May 2017. And obviously enforcement is split into two teams, one north, one south. And obviously part of the enforcement service, we have ward-based principal enforcement officers who deal with complex cases. Through ASB, they deal with some fly tipping issues that cover the complicated domestic noise complaints. They deal with a lot of antisocial behaviour, such as going to court, getting closure orders where ASB is taking place. I can give you an example. Last week, an officer went to a magistrate's court last week to get a closure order where somebody was being cuckooed in their own flat, where drug dealing was going on, and officers got a closure order to actually allow the person to remain within the property while nobody else is allowed in, because he was being cuckooed by his vulnerability, being cuckooed by people coming in, undertaking drug dealing and other ASB, which obviously is not appropriate. Moving on to paragraph 4.05, page 115. Obviously, the service has support some of its own provision, which I mean gaining income. So they do that through sort of the service of fixed penalty notices, which are undertaken on a daily basis. And obviously, on the next page, paragraph 4.06, the enforcement officer interactions are usually one-off offences. As I've already referred to, the principal enforcement officers deal with the more detailed stuff, casework, dealing with that, investigating noise, ASB. And paragraph 4.7 on pages 116, 117 and 118 sort of shows the activities undertaken by the enforcement service, which I won't go into any detail in it. What will be of interest to members is at the bottom of page 4.08 is that both enforcement and environmental protection provide the staffing for the out-of-hours noise service, which, as you know, is a very busy service, and paragraphs 4.9 onwards show how they actually deal with issues as they come about. And one of the problems can be that if, for example, we get complaints over, for example, a rave in Hackney Marshes or Wick Woodland, for example, which happens on a regular basis, then that can take up a lot of resource, and then other issues won't get responded to because we haven't got 20 people out dealing with noise. We've got two teams of two dealing with all the complaints that come in on a night. And you will see on paragraph 4.15, the bottom of page 119, that when COVID commenced in March, the number of complaints sort of increased phenomenally in April, May and June. And compared to that, in April, May 2021, reports are significantly reduced compared to that. And that's due to lockdown easing and the unseasonal weather in May as well. And you'll see there are some charts and tables on pages 120 and 121, which sort of show the fluctuations, which you will see the top of page 121 is the increases in April to September 2020, and obviously they have decreased since. Chart 4, the wording on that is incorrect. It should say comparison of noise reports April 29 and September 2020. So it should say April to September 2019 compared with April to September 2020. And again, you see the increases in what has happened in those months. And chart 5 on page 122 just shows the noise reports we've had from October to May 2020 to May 2021. The reason that is split up, which will become what you should be aware of, is the actual cyber attack happened early October. So we obviously lost our database, and fortunately we've still been able to get records of noise reports received, which I didn't think we would be able to for that very reason. We were able to find them another way. So we have got all the records, and as you will see, they're actually quite detailed, broke down the issues which have come up. If I go to page 123 and the risk assessment associated with that, obviously on paragraph 4.5.2, the rate of growth is a big factor, and obviously we all know that housing is a problem in the borough, so with increased housing, it's being built closer to commercial premises, so obviously there's a very fine balance to be struck between the operation of a commercial business and housing, which can be within 15, 20 feet of the commercial business. And some of these businesses operate late at night, so it is a very, very fine balance to be struck between that and the operation of the business. And obviously, people move into these properties and they don't necessarily know that there sort of is a licensed premises 20 feet away from them. People don't realise that. Even though it may be visible to you and me, not everyone would be aware of that, of their surroundings. So that's something I want to bring to your attention. Obviously, through issuing our FPNs, we do that through a mobile technology, and I'll come back to that later. And obviously, 4.5.5, the same page 123, resource deployment. So obviously, we need enforcement officers to have a visible presence on the street for high priority areas, including the nighttime economy. And obviously getting the balances right for that. And obviously we have good partnership working with the police teams, whether it's the Safer Neighbourhood team or whether it's on the nighttime economy with the dedicated with the team on the nighttime economy. And I think it's reassuring for residents, and feedback I get that they feel that the presence of officers on the street reassures residents. And obviously enforcement officers can't do everything, so there's so much they can do. If I move on to page 124, paragraph 4.5.9, which again relates to dealing with nuisance neighbours and domestic noise, is still the greatest source of ASB reports as a service, which, as I said, demand increase. You can see from you've seen from the charts, that's the case. And for example, the period January to December 2020, we received 7,700 domestic noise reports. For the previous year, it was 4,645. So it's a huge increase in reports. Then paragraph 4.5.10, we obviously changed, in May 2018, changed our reporting system. And I'll come to how that has changed in a minute. Obviously, the cyber attack in October changed that. So we were without an online reporting system for a few months because of that. But we did have a workaround in place to deal with noise reports from the Monday, as I said, out, same way with food, the Monday after the cyber attack. So if I move on to paragraph 4.5.13, page 125. So with our ICT team, we were approached to work with other services about reporting a problem. I'm looking at the functionality of Fix My Street, and we have done a lot of work on that since then. And we were working on that when the cyber attack happened. So to a certain extent, that has helped us because we're looking at that. But what we're still short of is implementing a sort of back-end case management system for noise complaints. And we are working with Fix My Street on that. And it's still in development. And obviously we have, as I said, on the food report, we have developed we're buying a new database with a database provider, and that is being implemented. Paragraph 4.17 on page 125 again refers to service of fixed penalty notices. And you will see that despite COVID and the cyber attack, we actually served more fixed penalty notices in 2021 than we had done the previous year. And again, that's due to Well, I have to say the system for implementing fixed penalty notices wasn't affected by the cyber attack. Part of it was we used to issue some with paper. We're no longer able to do that. They're all issued now through handheld mobile technology. It's the only way we issue fixed penalty notices since October. But it didn't really affect how we did things. And then on page 126 and 127, there's a breakdown. It's actually a 3-year comparison of fixed penalty notices, 2018-19, 2019-20, 2020-21. And obviously a breakdown as well of fixed penalty notices issued by month. And on the top of page 128, there's a breakdown of fixed penalty notices served by area. And you will actually see that a majority of FPNs have been served in, I would say, London Fields and Shoreditch. So you can actually see that's where the level of activity. What I haven't put in this report, which I did want to make mention to, is 2 things. One, last year during lockdown, the first lockdown, because of the level of antisocial behaviour that was occurring in both Hackney Marshes and London Fields, we had to apply to the High Court for 2 injunctions, which were granted. We did get an injunction for a week which prevented people consuming alcohol in London Fields, but it wasn't granted on a permanent basis. And both those injunctions were incredibly successful, and obviously it did require a lot of additional resource to ensure that we enforce the injunctions as well. Unfortunately, the both injunctions have expired, and due to a legal case, we're no longer able to pursue injunctions against persons unknown. Our legal advisor may provide you more information on that should you require it. And I think that's it, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jerry, for the report, and also thank you. Can you pass on our thanks to your officers for carrying out their work, during quite difficult circumstances. Okay, members, has anybody got any questions? Councillor Stopps.
Thank you very much. Just the one that I've raised so many times. We want to see tables and chairs and outside dining. We're keen on that, and that's good that's happening. And we know the reason for more of it. But we also want to see compliant tables and chairs because of the equality issues and others that we've talked about in the past. I just wonder if, just the question is, are you getting up to speed with all the activity that's happening around the various tables and chairs? I know it's not strictly your bag, it belongs to Daniel, and we never managed to get 2 officers in the same room at the same time. One of my great failings, I think, is not to get everybody together to talk about this. But can we be assured that you're working together with your colleagues and tables and chairs and planters and God knows what to make sure all these things are compliant? Thank you.
Over to Jerry.
Councillor Stopps, yes, and I've even better news for you. We've actually started to serve FPNs for highway obstructions on the TfL network.
Hooray!
Hey.
Oh, well, good to.
Why did you save that for the Q&A?
Oh, that is a good thing. Well done. That didn't cause any pain or suffering to anybody. Well done.
Anybody got any more questions? That's very welcome news from Councillor Stopps. Councillor Spence and Councillor Joseph. So I'll take Councillor Spence first.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about, hang on, page, where is it? It's about the prosecutions. There's a table in your plan which shows last year against this year. Yeah, this is page 154. Key performance indicators. And the one that jumps out at me is the penultimate line, prosecutions and formal cautions. So in 2019-20, we recorded 53. That's now, obviously, last year. I'm guessing you're going to say it's related to the pandemic in some way, but it's fallen to 3 prosecutions.
Yes, that it is exactly related to COVID, because the courts are still not operating to this day, because any prosecutions we've had have been in abeyance. And We used to do fixed penalty notice prosecutions using a single justice system. That hasn't been enough. We haven't been able to use that either. And so that's why the number of prosecutions is significantly down from the previous year.
So simply the magistrates are not.
The only the only things we have been able to go to court on is we need to get a warrant to go in and enter and seize noise equipment, or if we go for a closure order under the Antisocial Behaviour Act. They're the two cases we've not had difficulty going to court getting. But general prosecutions, they're not a priority for the court. And we have cases now that will not be heard until 2022.
Right. So can I just ask, have the courts reopened now in regard to these prosecutions?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge, okay.
Councillor Spencer, do you want to ask a further question?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously it's a concern, or ought to be a concern, I think, for the committee that we're not able to follow through with prosecutions, because, I mean, obviously that's the ultimate sort of sanction that we as a local authority have, where people aren't, paying fixed penalty notices, which I guess are the main reason that we have to prosecute, where people don't pay the fine. And it's obviously a concern that people are essentially getting away with it, it seems to me.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to that? Can I ask you, Jerry, whether it's the numbers of prosecutions we've actually tried to bring has changed, or it's simply that they're stuck in a queue in the way we've described? So have we got a similar number to 2019 waiting from last year, or is that down as well?
I don't think we'd better any cases, because obviously we would have to take cases within 6 months of an offence happening to court, and obviously we wouldn't even start doing cases if we didn't think we would get them to court within 6 months, because a summons has to be issued within 6 months of an offence happening. And our legal advisor, I think, wants to say something.
Josephine.
Hello all. Yeah, just a bit of an update. So the magistrates weren't really doing any local authority prosecutions at all during the COVID-19 pandemic. The person that does the majority of prosecutions are in my team. The courts have started opening up for a lot of prosecutions, but there is a massive backlog, and any CPS cases will be done as a priority over local authority ones. So any serious criminal ones will be looked at first. There is a backlog. Jerry is right. There are cases going into the next year. There are cases that we, have got in that are sometimes still being put back. With the single justice procedure, we are hoping to maybe start them again soon, because I have been talking to members of Jerry's team about it. But I mean, all around, it's been a very, very difficult year. So that is why. And we have got prosecutions in court and being issued in court. But even when they're being issued now, they're likely not to be heard for a long time.
Is it related to this item,
No.
Councillor? Okay, I think we've got Councillor Joseph first, and then I'll come to you. Councillor Spence, did you want to ask any follow-on to that at all, or?
Well, other than to say, I mean, as a local authority, I mean, obviously it affects not just us, but every other local authority.
Yeah.
And it's a point of concern that the courts are under-resourced, such that we can't follow through on our statutory obligations to enforce these regulations, and to prosecute people who ought to be prosecuted because they're flouting local bylaws and the like.
Yeah, a point very well made, Councillor Spence. Jerry, did you want to say something else? Sorry, no. Okay, Councillor Joseph, would you like to raise your question?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jerry, and my apologies for lateness this evening. My question relates to noise nuisance reports between neighbours. As Jerry touched on, we've obviously got a bit of a housing crisis, not just in this borough, but across London. But we do have a lot of overcrowded households, and I think that is contributing to noise nuisance complaints. I'm just wondering, Jerry, does your team pick up the noise nuisance complaints in the long term? Like, would you be responsible for providing the mediation officers that work with neighbours, or does that come from the housing department? And I'm sort of interested in the next steps, like what route we go down if mediation doesn't resolve these issues between neighbours. And you mentioned, I suppose this is just a second part of the same kind of question really, that, we've got commercial premises now very close to where people are living. As a council, we've got this big drive to convert garages into commercial premises, sometimes residences. And I'm just wondering, what caveats do you think we should actually be putting in around that? Because I share your concerns that actually sometimes we have, sometimes we have people living far too close to businesses that are creating quite a lot of noise. So what are your views on that? Thanks very much. Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you. The council doesn't have a mediation service, but I do know that on occasion Hackney Housing offers a mediation. I think they pay for that separately. So my understanding is that there isn't an actual contract with a provider to offer mediation. That's my understanding. That could be wrong on that, but I can check that out for you. But that's what I believe. A lot of the work our officers do is mediation between neighbours anyway, because what they do involves that, because X complains that Y's dog was barking at 11 p.m. and they say, Y says, no, my dog wasn't out at 11 p.m. So a lot of the work officers do, principal enforcement officers, a lot of the work they do is mediation between neighbours in dealing with cases anyway. And if there are sort of ongoing issues, we're quite strict about serving notices, and we will go to court and get a warrant and seize equipment if people continue to do that. And with general antisocial behaviour, say drug dealing or that type of thing, we are very proactive on going to get closure orders under the Antisocial Behaviour Act. Since April this year, we've got about 6 alone, bearing in mind we only did 5 in the last financial year. So our officers are very good at picking up stuff. And also, the other thing I would say to you as well is that we have regular antisocial behaviour action panels. So if somebody complains about antisocial behaviour, their case is automatically triaged. And if they score above a certain level on the index, then that case automatically goes to an antisocial behaviour action panel, where sort of a partnership approach is taken and a decision is made by the partnership on where to go on that case. One of the problems we do have, and I will admit that this is a problem, is actually dealing with housing associations. Some are very good and some are not as good as others in taking responsibility for their tenants and the actions of their tenants. And your final question about garages, if a garage is being converted, it would need planning permission. There should be something in the planning permission, say if there are flats above that, to ensure that the commercial parts of the building are adequately soundproofed from the residential parts of the building. And if, for example, there is ventilation extraction equipment associated with it, it complies with all the rules and regulations and British standards to ensure it doesn't cause nuisance to any residents. And having said that, you are correct. I did raise that issue, and I know Shoreditch, you know that area very well. That is a particular problem with residential and businesses, and it's a very fine balancing act as to how you deal with them.
Councillor Joseph, do you have any follow-on to that at all?
No, not really. I mean, I just think the council will need to be quite careful, because obviously as the borough continues to densify and densify, I can see more issues between neighbours. I'm having a lot of casework at the moment where people are living in converted buildings and they can hear everything that their neighbour's doing. And it's not necessarily deliberate antisocial behaviour. It's just life, but it's really disturbing their neighbours and vice versa. So yeah, it's quite a big issue, I think, at the moment.
It is a very fine balancing act. And as Jerry pointed out, the fact that many of us have been at home more, and perhaps that's a pattern that's going to continue to a certain extent with more hybrid working, that, you know, the volume of complaints has increased in that respect, when maybe not necessarily the amount of actual behaviour has changed necessarily, but people are more aware and alert to to what's going on in their immediate home environment. Okay, over to Councillor Hanson, who's would like to raise a question.
Thank you. I was looking at the table of fixed penalty notices on pages 126 to 127. So we have 483 for litter and 0 for dog fouling. Now, I'm as against litter as the next person, but dropping a crisp packet I actually think is possibly less antisocial than letting your dog foul the pavement where children are walking and things like that. And I have asked this question in previous years when this figure has been 0. Why is this not a priority for this service, or has no officer throughout the whole year observed any dog fouling?
Thank you for that question, Councillor. Some of the littering FPNs could be for dog fouling, but I couldn't tell you the exact number because you will see there on the table, they're all spread out very differently as how they're done. So dog fouling could be under littering. It depends how the officer are actually serving any notice, which you'll see even for the Highways Act, there are a variety of notices served, because you will see that there's generic notices for highway obstruction, and then there's the specific sections of the Act as well. So what I will do is I can double check to see if we have served any FPNs for dog fouling, but I would say we have served some, I know that. And there was also a part of the year where our PSPO in relation to dog control expired in October 2020, and it wasn't renewed until March 2021. So there would have been a period of 5 or 6 months where we wouldn't have been able to issue an FPN for dog fouling.
Thank you. I mean, that sort of information would be really helpful to put as a footnote to the report, because otherwise, someone reading this would think that the figure was actually 0. So thanks for that explanation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Councillor Ozen.
Yeah, about noise issue. Jerry, it's about the wooden floor noise from the above flats in the estates, and what do we do for it? And as far as I know, the above flats are not allowed to have wooden floors. Is that correct? First of all.
Did you hear that, Jerry? So Councillor Ozen queried about wooden floors in flats. So he's basically saying what kind of measures can residents take in terms of complaining, and whether it was allowed in terms of conversions you're talking about, Councillor Ozen, in floors above, yeah?
Thank you, Chair. That if it's private property has been converted into various flats, that actually is a civil matter. So people are not complying with requirements of their lease. If they are housing association or Hackney Housing, then it potentially is a breach of their tenancy agreement, and then that's up to the landlord to take action for a breach of the tenancy agreement.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Ozen?
Well, it's
No.
clear on the tenancy agreement.
Is it clear on the tenancy agreement? I mean, I'm not sure whether Jerry would be able to answer that, but certainly it can be referred
It's
to.
a standard clause in Hackney tenancy agreements, but in private houses, it would be a matter for the individual lease.
Yeah.
In social housing, it's a standard clause.
Standard clause, yeah. Any other questions from members? Councillor Chowan.
Just a quick query on this pitching of stalls and booze. What type of stalls and booths are being pitched? I mean, what are they selling, and where are they being pitched at as well? What kind of areas?
What kind of, sorry?
What kind of stalls and booths are being pitched? What are they actually selling, and where are they actually located? Is there a general area? It's on page 126.
Okay. So, Jerry, did you get that?
Yes, Chair, I got that. There are people potentially doing illegal street trading, so they could be selling anything. And if for example, it was in Shoreditch on the nighttime economy, the chief culprits there would be people selling jerk chicken, which we know happens. But it could be any goods that are for sale and are obstructing the highway.
Yeah. Okay. Members, I'm just looking around.
I have a question, please.
Is that
Thank you.
Councillor Root?
It
Go
is,
on,
yeah.
Go on, Councillor Root. Go ahead with your question.
I just wanted to ask a question about smoke from domestic gardens, actually, and whether or not there's been a significant increase in complaints about that, with people having fires in their gardens whilst people couldn't meet inside but were meeting outside. And Mr. McCarthy will be familiar with a constituent of mine who's got a problem with a neighbour who often has a sort of a contained fire pit. And he's very regularly monitoring the smoke that comes from it, and is complaining to both the Neighbours Housing Association but also to Hackney Council, wanting some enforcement action from Hackney Council. And I'm copied into all of this correspondence, and I have to say it doesn't seem to me ever so clear what our responsibilities are with regard to that kind of smoke. And I just wonder if that's something that we're looking into, particularly given all the publicity that there is about pollution from wood-burning stoves inside houses as well at the moment, which have obviously become a bit trendy. It's really just a question about whether or not we're getting more smoke complaints, and if we're clear about what we should be doing about it, I suppose.
I can say we're not getting many complaints. They're very few and far between. And as far as I'm concerned, we're very clear about what we're doing, but other people may have other views. And as far as my view is that somebody having a barbecue in a domestic property does not constitute a nuisance under the Environmental Protection Act, and that's been made quite clear. So as far as we're concerned, that is not the case, and there is no provision in the Act for that, and that has been dealt with a number of times. The other thing is that we are in the process of updating our air quality pages along with our pollution pages with the Land and Air Quality team to take account of the issues raised to do with wood burning stoves, all that type of thing. So those pages are in the process of being updated on the website. But I don't really want to go into the specifics of that case here and now, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you outside of this to explain that. But as far as I'm concerned, people having a barbecue does not constitute a nuisance, smoke nuisance.
Yeah, I think it's not. I mean, it's not just a barbecue. I suppose it's that kind of slight fashion that there is for fire pits as well, which is not a barbecue as such. It's a different sort of fire outside. Not quite a bonfire, not quite a barbecue, bit more smoky. I mean, if we're not getting many complaints about it, then perhaps it doesn't matter. But I think there seems to be some confusion about what legislation those sorts of fires would come under if they are causing a nuisance.
Well, I think I've made that very clear to the resident in question without saying any, but I'm happy to have a further discussion with you separately.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. We've got one more question from Councillor Ozen. Go on, Councillor Ozen.
It's not a question, it's just additional
comment.
Information. Hackney is in the low emission zone. So I hear the concerns from residents around the canal side in the winter time, narrow boats using the wood for heating.
Okay.
That's the concern from some of the residents. Actually, it's not allowed in Hackney using those kind of wood, but there are wood which is smoke-free wood they can use. They are allowed to, which is okay for the low emission zone boroughs.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Councillor Ozen. Any comments on that, Jerry, at all? I think he was just making a comment. The councillor was making a comment.
It's not my specific area responsibility. My understanding is that people will not be able to allow to buy on wood that has not been properly. You won't be able to buy a wood from a garage going forward. I think from later this year. I don't know the exact date that you can put in the fire or whatever. But if there are any particular issues with canal boats burning wood, which is causing smoke issues, then we will deal with that. There are specific legal requirements in relation to that because it's from a chimney as opposed to a barbecue or a fire pit, which is different.
Okay, thank you for that, Jerry. If there are no more questions from members, could I just ask whether there are any resourcing concerns for your team in terms of enforcement and environmental protection, in the same way that we asked a question about the food standard service previously?
There are always resourcing issues, Councillor, but obviously we do what we can with the resources we have. And I have to say that you all probably know that London Fields is a very problematic area. And this year the council has given us adequate resources to deal with this over the summertime period. So Councillor Overton covers London Fields, he'll be able to see whether, and we have actually done quite a lot of enforcement there since April, and this will continue until October. One of the things you probably ought to know as well is that there is a proposal of consultation which ends on Sunday to actually bring in a public space control protection order, along with dealing with antisocial behaviour associated with alcohol consumption in the public place, is to actually ban the consumption of alcohol in London Fields Park itself. And depending on the outcome of the consultation, this may or may not go forward. We don't know yet. So it all depends on the consultation with businesses and residents and the outcome of the consultation. But I did say last year we got funding for an additional 2 environmental protection officers, which we didn't have before. And I now have enough funding for all the enforcement officers, which I didn't have previously either. But obviously there's always resourcing implications, and we always need more. We could do with more staff to do everything that needs to be done. But the resourcing implications are in both of those reports. And again, there is a slight shortage, but we are doing what we can with the resources we've got. And as I said, we have got significant resources to deal with London Fields, which is very welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Jerry. So no more questions, members. So this report was just for notice.
I think Councillor Joseph has a question.
Oh, she has. Sorry, Councillor Joseph. You're on mute.
Sorry, that's okay. I just had a couple. I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll just try and ask really quickly. I just wanted to know, in the report about trading standards, there was a mention about complaints about letting estate agents, and I was just interested in finding out a little bit more detail about that, if that's possible. And I also wanted to note in the same report, just as a comment really, I was really glad to see that the price increases in shops that has happened during COVID were being addressed, because I thought that was quite a cynical move actually, and quite a lot of the shops in my area were charging like £5 to £10 for toilet rolls at the beginning of the pandemic. So I'm quite pleased to see that we're looking into that. But yeah, I'd be interested in knowing a bit more detail about the estate agents and what.
A lot of the work officers do is to do with people getting their deposits back through the deposit scheme. And obviously we have got money back for quite a few people who obviously, due to the pandemic and everything, may not have been trying to cancel their rent on their property that they were renting out. And we have got money back for a lot of residents, for privately renters, through the deposit rent scheme. And the other thing we deal with estate agents as well is, which council stops will all know about, is the estate agents boards advertising, school fates and all that sort of thing for longer than a permitted period of time. They're the 2 big things we deal with. I can find out some more information and give you some examples of cases we've dealt with.
That'd be great, Jerry. Yeah, I think.
What I'll do is I can send it to Rabia and then she can circulate it to everyone.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be useful. Thank you, Jerry. If you can note that, Rabia, that'd be great. Okay, unless members have got any more. Councillor Joseph, just checking. You said you had 2 questions. You asked both, yeah?
Well, I do have another question. It's not related to the report, so I'm not sure if it would be better to bring it up under any other business, or would it be best to put it now? It's regarding the electric scooters and their enforcement.
That's a matter for the police, Councillor Joseph.
We don't deal with anything to do with that. Okay.
We're getting lots of queries about that.
I can imagine, because it's a really big issue at the moment.
Everywhere.
Quite dangerous. Yeah, they're everywhere. They're on the pavements, and the thing is, they build up such a speed. It's not even just like a bicycle, is it? They're going at 30 miles an hour. So we don't. all onto the police?
The police should be dealing with all of those. And I know I think they've done something. I know Councillor Fitzgerald Thomas is pressurising the police to take action on, because I've discussed it with her this week already. And
Okay.
she's meeting the Borough Commander this week, and she's raising it with him specifically.
Oh, that's really good. Okay, thank you.
So we can maybe get some feedback from Councillor Fitzgerald Thomas then. We can see if we can get to Joseph. Councillor Stopps, I heard you make a comment. Did you want to come in?
Just to say that the use is clearly a police matter, but if they are dumped on the pavement, they become an obstruction matter, and then we can ask Jerry to remove the things because they are a nuisance.
I haven't seen a lot of electric scooters being dumped on the pavement. I don't know whether, Jerry, you've come across that. Yes, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. Okay. All right, members. Well, Jerry, I'd like you to thank you for bringing your report, and you're very welcome to stay. But if you do want to leave at this point, you're very welcome to. Get your evening back. Okay. Moving on to agenda item 6. So that's skips on public highways within the borough. So following the Councillor Stopps and Councillor Snell raising the issue of the skip on the Graham Road, we did have an informal meeting which Councillor Ozen and I attended with Brian Foxton, and an email update was circulated. Have members had the opportunity to read that update, and do you think that addresses the question? I mean, Brian certainly did go into detail about how it's quite helpful to have raised the query, and how the work that officers do is much more stringent in that respect now. I don't know if you've got any comments, Councillor Stopps.
Yes, I have. Firstly, apologies, I couldn't make it. I forget what the reason was, but I would have made it if I could. And thanks for attending in my stead, or attending the meeting. I guess the point I'd like to make is that thank you that the officers have said that yes, we've thought about this, and it is a delegated decision. So we are not the decision makers. They make the decision, but clearly we felt the balance was wrong in this case. I think it is the case, though, that if we are to pursue the issue of local traffic neighbourhoods, that puts even more stress on our main roads, and all the various enforcement arms of the council, be they parking or whatever, have got to think harder about how they keep those roads operating sensibly.
Yeah.
Because you can't now go down Richmond Road if Graham Road is full of cars. So they've got to think more that we need more enforcement in terms of parking and obstructions and stuff like this. And I hope that's a feature of future activity of this committee.
Yeah, well, thank you. We will certainly pass on your comments, Councillor Stopps. I mean, they did say that they see very hard to find alternative solutions, and I don't think there's been a skip there since, has there? And it was removed shortly after that. So if members are happy with that response, and we'll pass on Councillor Stopps's comments to the officer. Okay, so the committee will note the verbal update.
Okay.
So agenda item 7, if you could turn your attention to the draft work programme. Any comments, members? Are you happy to note?
Oh, sorry, I didn't look at it. Can I just...
The very back, on page 183.
I mean, most of these we have to do once a year.
Yeah. If you just want to spend a couple of minutes having a look. So we've got the annual report of the Public Spaces Protection Order at the next meeting, and then the annual performance report of noise service in September. Yeah. The committee happy to note the work programme?
Is it possible to add something on about one which is seeing the noise issue? Council's response.
Sorry,
Is it
Councillor
possi- Is it,
Ozen.
yeah. Page 184, number 3,
Okay.
performance report of the noise service. It's a work program, yeah.
What
On this one,
What is the comment you're making? Sorry, Councillor Ozen.
what in the future, when if we have this item on the agenda, and is it possible to invite some people from the housing association as well on the same issue? If possible.
We could certainly look into that. Yes.
Some housing association representatives.
I'm not sure whether we'd actually invite the housing associations to this meeting, but perhaps we can have a look at having an informal conversation separate to this meeting. Sorry, Councillor Stops.
Chair, we do oversee the private sector housing people and their application of regulations, so that might be fruitful.
Okay, so we could perhaps look at inviting somebody from the private sector team.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think we've ever heard from them, but it'd be interesting to know the scope of what they do, and Jan can ask something about that if that works. The other thing is we had the tables and chairs license come to us a few months ago, and we were told that it was 124 pages or something. It would be nice to hear how it's all panning out in terms of the application of those new rules.
Okay. I think it's coming in March 2022. Update on policies for tables and chairs.
Okay, brilliant, yes.
Great. But thank you for your suggestion about the private rented sector team. We could look at inviting them, Rabia. Okay. Okay, happy to note that and welcome your comments. Agenda item 8, any other business?
England won.
Yeah,
Really?
2-0.
2-0.
And Harry Kane scored.
Thank you for that. We'll
All is forgiven.
Okay, well, I think with that, I'd like to say that the meeting is now closed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, officers.